Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to M4L Academy. My name's Missy Karwowski, Director of M4LA, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. This is our campus briefing series where we bring in subject matter experts to help you understand those complex topics, issues, politics, and policies that impact kids, schools, and your rights as a parent. In today's briefing, we're going inside the classroom, getting a behind-the-scenes look on how to navigate curriculum, culture, and communication. You'll probably recognize our guest from March when he shared firsthand experiences of restorative justice practices in schools. Daniel Buck is a research fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he leads the Conservative Education Reform Network and contributes to AEI's James Q. Wilson program in K-12 education studies. His work tackles some of the most pressing issues in education today, from curriculum reform and school safety to charter schooling and discipline. Before stepping into the policy arena, Daniel spent years on the front lines of education. He taught in both public and private schools, including Hope Christian Schools, Holy Spirit Middle School, and the Green Bay Area Public Schools, and later served as an assistant principal at Lake County Classical Academy. These experiences give him a grounded, real-world perspective that informs his research and advocacy. And as you'll see, he is a gifted communicator, which is why his writing has appeared in leading publications such as the Wall Street Journal, National Affairs, and National Review. He's also the author of What is Wrong with Our Schools? A sharp and insightful critique of modern education. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome back to class. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. I am excited to talk to you again because you were one of the first guests that I spoke to, golly, way back in March now, about restorative justice. So it's exciting to have you back on. You've had some recent exciting changes in your life too. You've before you were at the Fordham Institute primarily, and now you just took a new job, right?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. Always glad to join Moms for Liberty for any and all events. I joined up with the American Enterprise Institute, where I am both a research fellow and also the director of the Conservative Education Reform Network. So kind of a major career and professional shift there.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That
Thank
sounds
you.
really exciting. Do you feel like you get to have a little more kind of effective? Or not effective? Not that you weren't effective before, but do you feel like you get to have more impact or make some bigger steps?
Well, I really like CERN's mission. Rick Hess over at AEI as kind of the brain behind it all. And the left, they have a lot of institutions and organizations and networks that kind of build out their benches for institution leaders, for policymakers, for Senate and Hill staffers, especially in education. They have the unions, they have professional organizations, they have the teachers' colleges, all of these things that kind of give them this huge network of personnel to fill whatever the position is needed. And the right just doesn't have that. So we're kind of trying to fill that gap, bring everyone on the right together, share ideas, kind of promote each other's work, and try and pass better policy and make better schools.
I think that is so badly needed. I've heard many other people say it before. I don't think I'm going to be the first person ever to say this, that it feels like the left is always, I don't know, a couple steps ahead of the right. And I like to think it's because we are very much of the live and let live mentality. We just want to be able to go and live a good life. And so unfortunately it takes us a bit of time to get caught up sometimes. So I'm excited to hear what you're doing. I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing next or
I
what
always
comes out of that. I think it's going to be great.
I always say we're too busy cutting the grass to bother going to a protest.
I think that's fair. That's a good way to say it. You have a couple of interesting things actually that I'm excited to. I like the way you phrase things. I think you do it in very approachable and appealing ways. So that definitely sums it up. Which takes us to. I'm going to take us over to the key topic for today. So this is one of our campus briefing series. We are in the campus briefing. We do a little bit similar to how we used to do like a 101 or 102. But we're going to do it a bit more of an interview style and talking to you about the key topic, which today is going inside the classroom. So we're going to look at navigating curriculum, culture, and communications. As the setup for this for all of our wonderful people is we have probably as most parents, at least for me, I know I'm one of these parents who had this. I remember my own school experience, and I honestly just assumed that was how school continued to be. I don't know why. I feel like that's a very naive and silly thing to have ever thought. And I promise I'm not super ridiculously unintelligent. But I just thought that school, my schooling time was fine. It can't be that bad. So as parents become more engaged or just start to see the assignments coming home, they're often shocked and frankly overwhelmed by what their kids are learning. So I'd like to start off talking about how did we get to this point? How has education shifted so dramatically from reading, writing, and arithmetic to essentially radical ideologies and training little activists?
Yeah, this isn't really anything new necessarily. There have been kind of a few strains of education thought that have been pushing back and forth in our country. I mean, going at least back to the 1800s. And to cover it, I need to kind of go into the stratosphere a little bit. I promise you, listeners, I'll make it accessible and I won't bore you all with philosophy for too long. But there's really three categories of thought and approaches to education that are, in the water in American education. The first one is what we all want, some sort of classical liberal arts approach to education. The idea that there are beautiful books that students should be reading. There's certain history that's more significant that students should be learning, that there are great heroes and villains that they should learn about to emulate and kind of, learn what not to do. There are important scientific discoveries that it's essential that kids know. And it is the school's job to teach that to the kids, and it's the kids' job to learn it. Nowadays we have to call that classical or liberal arts education, but for most people, that's just what we would call an education. The second kind of bucket of thought would be termed progressive education. And it's this idea that, no one idea is better than another necessarily. And kids are going to learn the best if we just leave them be, right? They're little angels, they're little flowers, and all of these adult rules and imposed knowledge is just kind of going to snuff out their little spark. So what should be the approach to the classroom? We just kind of let them be, and they'll discover all of that knowledge on their own. They'll learn it by osmosis. It's not really political, even though it's called progressive education. That's more a philosophical term, not kind of that like politically loaded term. So it's not really political. It just doesn't work. And then the third bucket is really the most concerning one, might be termed critical pedagogy. And it's a lot of the radical stuff that we've seen in the last years. So that's this idea. It comes from Marxism, and it imposes this oppressor-oppressed dichotomy onto the teacher and the student. Any imposition of knowledge is oppressive. Any imposition of rules is oppressive. And the goal of the classroom is to undermine society, deconstruct all of these oppressive norms, not training activists in the future, but working with students right now to change it now. Okay, level setting done. How did we get here? These three strains were kind of tugging back and forth for 100 years, since at least the 60s, and going back to the 1920s at least. But with Donald Trump's election and the George Floyd summer, the traditionalists, the classical educators, the liberal arts educators, the conservatives, they just kind of wilted. They stopped pushing back. And we saw a lot of charter schools, revoke. There's a famous one. KIPP had this, their motto was work hard, be nice. And they revoked that motto because it was, rooted in oppression and paternalism and all of these things. And everyone that was
it the be nice part that was oppressive, or was it the work hard that was being oppressive? That's
both
just
of
such an
them.
odd phrase.
Really? It's building up this idea that America is meritocratic. Wow, why can't I say that word right now? Meritocratic. And that's pushing a lie. And this idea that we should just be nice is, silencing voices and advocating that kids should just follow the rules and obey, which is ridiculous. What else do we want for our children other than for them to work hard to get a good job and be nice to each other? But yeah, it just, in the last 5 years, the traditionalists kind of wilted under political pressure, and then the progressives and the criticalists just ran rampant over schools. And finally, we're starting to see some pushback, and we're winning some gains again.
Well, I do agree that it feels like we're finally getting some gains, which is such a relief, frankly, after when when I really started engaging, and that's not the right word. When I really started to wake up, I realized just how wrong I was, that the school I had, the experience I had, is not the experience my kids were having. And it was really sad, frankly, because while I don't need to go back to school, I have no desire to go back to high school. I like where I'm at now, but I have plenty of good memories from it. And it just feels like the school that our kids are in now is it's just sad, frankly. It's really sad. So when it's great that we're making gains, and that's fabulous. But of course, we know that we can't stop fighting back because the left is still fighting. So when we're looking for red flags, how can parents identify any red flags? What are red flags in curriculum that they should be trying to identify? How do they know if their school is using bad curricula, quote unquote, bad curricula? What should they be looking for?
Yeah, a good way to answer that question is, first off, what's the good they should be looking for?
Okay.
You want your kids reading classic literature. You want a teacher-led classroom. You want a school that believes in consequences and kind of protecting the learning of the 19 other kids in the classroom and not sacrificing it for the one student who's misbehaving. You want them learning great history and all of these kinds of things. If a school tries to push against any of that, that's when you immediately should be asking questions. It's not inherently a red flag, but there's always people that are going to be trying to push their agenda into the schools. And anytime a school deviates from that core academic purpose is a time to ask a question. So what might this
What would
look
that
like?
I was just going to say, what would it look like when a school's pushing back on you? What does that mean?
So I was going to then move on to say, um, you got to look for, don't even just look for red flags. You got to figure out what are the kids doing in the classroom. So is your teacher following this progressive line of teaching? So you're going to hear words like student-centered, inquiry, discovery learning, project-based learning. It's a lot of utopian and appealing language, but it just doesn't work, right? If you drop a kid into a math class and you ask them to discover long division, they can't do it. In the abstract, it sounds nice, but once you put it in practice, it becomes patently absurd. But it's an easy sell because, well, we want to have student-centered learning. Well, yeah, of course I do. Who wouldn't want to do student-centered learning? What monster would be opposed to that? But when it actually plays out in the classroom, it just doesn't work. And then the other thing to watch out for, again, is this more radical, critical approach to education. And that's we're going to see things like action civics, where kids are just studying modern political issues instead of actually learning history. They're going to be reading all books. They might even read some classic works of literature, but they're going to do it through lenses. So they do it through feminist lenses. They do it through Marxist lenses. All of the things that they're learning in science is just all of the content areas, literature, science, history, just become a medium to push the same message, to push the same narrative, right? They're not learning history to learn history. They're learning history to learn this very progressive worldview about oppression and racism and sexism and all of these things. They're not learning science to learn science. Science is becoming a means to teach the same idea about oppression and racism and sexism and all of the other things. They're not reading books because there's great stories they need to learn or great passages and rhetoric that they should be exposed to, but to learn the same worldview about racism and oppression and sexism and all of those other things.
That's just so frustrating because I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if they're reading a book that we may have read, for example, but we read it with this idea, like you said, of learning about the culture or a specific, like focusing on expanding your understanding of the time or that experience as opposed to training kids. How do you find out? How do you get into actually uncover that in the classroom to know that the teacher's doing that, even if they're using resources that seem very good?
I mean, look at the worksheets. What kinds of questions are they asking?
Okay.
Are they, if they're reading Romeo and Juliet, are they asking basic questions? What happened in this story? What does this passage mean? And pulling out the themes that are, in Romeo and Juliet that we may remember for our own high schooling about love and parents and societal conflict and these kinds of things. Or are they just inserting a lot of modern questions and, political neuroses and obsessions into it? And then also ask, what are they doing during class? Are they reading during class? Are they answering questions during class? Are they taking notes during class? Or are they being left to discover and ask their own questions? Are they having restorative circles where they're deconstructing the narrative, figure out what's actually happening in the classroom, and ask a few more questions over the dinner table and just, what'd you learn at school today? Be a little more pointed. What'd you read in literature? Oh, what kinds of questions did they ask? What did you do after you read it? Did you work on a worksheet or do something else?
That's really a good point. You highlight something that's so my children, my youngest just graduated high school, and I will say drawing that out of your kids can at times be very challenging. So just encourage everyone not to give up, to keep trying to have those conversations. But that's really a good point. I like the way that you bring it in, that it's kind of subtle instead of just being really too probing to your kids. It's, oh, well, what about this little thing over here? And I would imagine most kids probably wouldn't even pick up on the fact that you're trying to gather that information, which I don't mean that in like a sneaky way. It's simply, sometimes I feel like children they want to not expose, or they want to not get in trouble. And if they think that they're going to say something that you as a parent may not like, I have found that can make some kids be reticent to responding as much or giving as much information. Or maybe they're just tired and they don't really care. But I love those types of questions, to be able to dive in there, especially because the questions are really needed, since a lot of times right now we're seeing kids going to no textbook at all or no handouts. It's all online stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're seeing these stories come out where students aren't reading any books. They're going to college and they haven't read a single book from cover to cover. And you kind of touched on one of the major causes there, which is phones, screens. I saw a statistic recently from Education Week. Someone's going to correct me on the exact numbers, but it was something along the lines of 1/5 of students or 1/4 of students spend 5 hours a day at school on a screen, not on their phones,
Oh
but
my
on their
goodness.
Chromebook. Learning
Wow.
is moving online. So why aren't, everyone's like, what in the world? Why are kids not reading a book from cover to cover? One of the major reasons is all of learning is moving online. So their, literature class might be on Lexia. And instead of reading a book, they're just getting passages that they're going to answer questions to.
Oh.
Zern is the online math platform. Their history lesson might be a YouTube video or documentary that they watch and answer questions, and it's all on Google Classroom. Everything's moving online. Few other reason kids aren't reading a book from cover to cover. Student choice over literature is kind of all the rage now. And that's, again, in this more progressive realm of instruction where there's no books that are better than others. And kids are going to learn best if we just let them pick and read whatever they want to read.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
really
I'm
interesting.
seeing.
Interesting.
Yeah, the justification is that kids are going to be more motivated to read if they pick the books that they want to read. Again, that's one of these things that sort of sounds appealing, in practice, and it's assumed as gospel in a lot of schools, and especially the university teacher prep programs. This is just assumed it's the best way to teach, is just to let kids pick whatever they want. But what does that mean? Usually they're going to pick whatever's easiest. They're going to find the shortest book, the easiest book, or something like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And most of them, instead of actually reading the book during class time, they just slip a phone out between the pages. I've
Oh,
seen
wow.
a lot of bad teachers struggle their way through To Kill a Mockingbird or Romeo and Juliet. And I've seen a lot of skilled teachers struggle to make student choice work. It just doesn't in practice. A bad teacher, like, the book is so good. If you're reading a great book, it kind of just, kids love it anyways. But even good teachers struggle to run a class where everyone's reading something different. All the kids' incentives run, so they're going to pick the easiest thing. But yeah, that kids aren't even reading books in school anymore. Like you said, we just assume it's going to be the way it was when we were growing up, and that's just not the case.
That is genuinely shocking to me. And I have to say, I feel a little personally duped because so I never had an issue reading. And I actually, neither did my kids personally. I've always been a big reader. I absolutely love reading. I just love the imagination. And my children are huge avid readers, to the point where I legitimately had to ground my kids from reading because they were reading so much. They weren't doing chores, they weren't doing anything else. And it was just getting to be out of hand. And I know that sounds silly, but genuinely, I think everything needs like limits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that part, the reason I say share that silly story is because it was so shocking to me to hear that kids weren't finishing a full book. And I actually have heard that concept before recently. I would say it was probably 5 or 10 years ago at least that I heard. It's got to be at least 10 years ago that I heard that idea of allow kids to read what they're interested in. That's a way to get them engaged in reading. But what I didn't know is that somehow a class is supposed to be teaching the concepts based on multiple different books. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. That's just insane. Is this sort of thing happening in other subjects as well, like math and science? Like, are they, would we be seeing similar examples of ways that students aren't learning basic concepts? I feel like we probably will.
Yeah, it manifests differently in every content area too. So starting with math, California is kind of leading the way on this one. They adopted a new math framework. The first edition of it was absolutely bonkers, full of, learning about white supremacy and food deserts. And I mean, you name a concept of the left, microaggressions, white fragility, whatever it is, and it shows up in this math class. Like, why would, even if you want to teach those concepts, keep it to like a high school sociology class or something. Why are we doing this in math?
Yeah.
They got a lot of blowback, understandably, and California kind of edited out most of the crazy political stuff, but they kept this discovery learning that I kind of alluded to earlier in our conversation, where the teachers in California are compelled to not actually teach math. So they might put a problem up on the board that the students haven't seen, and then they ask the class, well, how might you solve this? And they kind of try and draw or they let the kids, struggle with it. Productive struggle is this word that they love to use, like it's a Maoist struggle session. We're going to let the
Wow.
kids kind of struggle it and see if somebody can figure it out. And you'll have a few kids who their parents tutored them at home or a little brighter than others that might figure it out. And then, class can kind of move along. It's individualized neglect. Anyways, it's failing kids discreetly, but the kids don't learn it. One or two figure it out. In the discussion, one or two say, hey, this is how we figured it out. The teacher's like, oh, well, see, it worked because these two kids got it. And then they demonstrate how to do it on the board. But by the end of the lesson, all of the other kids are confused because they sat there, they experienced so many incorrect ways to do it. They are frustrated at this point that by the time they actually get the correct solution, they're just too frustrated, exhausted, confused, distracted, whatever it is, to actually learn the content. So that's how it's playing out in
Wow.
math. It's showing up elsewhere too. I've seen it in Louisville and a bunch of other districts across the country. History, a lot of individual study or a lot of focus on students researching their own kind of contemporary issue. So we're going to pick urban poverty, and the kids are going to kind of pick their own little topic on it, and then you're going to have a unit where they are on their computers researching in quotes, and then they make a poster that they present to the class. If you know children, most of those kids on their Chromebook for 2 weeks are going to spend it flipping through YouTube videos or games or whatever it is. And when the teacher walks by, they go back to a tab with the reading open and pretend like they're working. It's a waste of time, and they don't actually learn any history. They don't learn about the Civil War. They don't learn about the Holocaust. 2/3 of millennials can't. They don't know what Auschwitz is. It's a terrifying little statistic for you.
Wow.
And then science is the same thing. It's just, here's a broad topic. You pick what you want to research, and we'll set you loose. And hopefully you learn something by the end of it, rather than laying out over the course of 12 years, year by year, what are all the things that kids should know by the time they graduate, and let's make sure they're exposed to all of it.
Well, that leads perfectly into the next thing I wanted to talk about. You published very recently a piece on grade inflation, which we've definitely seen. I know I anecdotally have seen it. I worked extremely hard in school, and I would see my children getting good grades, but I would see what they were producing and think to myself, you've got to be kidding me. This is a joke. But at the same time, this leads many parents to think as long as their kids are getting good grades, then everything's fine. They don't have anything to worry about. However, especially I think nowadays, good grades really don't equate to actual student proficiency. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's so many things going on here. First of all, there's just the incentives go against honesty in the school system. As both the teacher and an administrator, I felt the pull. I pushed against it because I knew it was best for kids, but I felt the pull towards complacency and just giving everyone an A and moving along and not having sometimes tough, honest conversations. Again, I pushed against that draw, but it's much easier to just give a student a B and move them along than to sit down with a parent and say, your kid can't read. This work that they give us is not up to par. They're going to get an F this semester. In some cases, we think they should be held back. I'm sure you can imagine parents don't always take that very well. It's hard to hear, and I understand why. So the incentives in the system are to just make it seem like everything's okay. Even at the district level, no superintendent wants to go out and give a press conference or send an email to all of the parents and say, wow, we really bombed it this year. We need to change things. It's much easier to set the bar very low so all of the schools can say, look, we're meeting expectations. In Wisconsin, I think there's precisely 0 schools that didn't meet expectations. And
wow.
I was looking at the district report cards, and there are, all of these schools that meet or exceed expectations, and 10% of their kids can read on grade level, which leaves you wondering, well, what's the expectation? But the incentive there is to do that, because it just makes everything easier. It makes the press easier. It makes publicity easier. It makes interactions with parents easier, because everyone can just say, we're meeting expectations. No one asks questions, and there's no problems. So that's a big problem. Another one is there's a lot of advocates pushing for grading reform out there. And there's a whole lot of different names, and each one's a bit different. There's standards-based grading, there's equity grading, there's no zeros grading. Each one's a bit different. Yeah, no zeros grading. We'll start with that one. That one's the most patently absurd. No zeros grading is exactly what it sounds like. No zeros. So if a student turns in no homework, they get 50%. If you give them a test and they refuse to take it, they get 50%. If they hand in an essay that is the same word repeated over and over and over and over, you give them 50%. I'm not kidding. This has
Wow.
traction. And I'm accused of hating children because I say this is ridiculous. Why?
And like you're advocating for children, because I'm from the business world, so I'm so sorry. This literally just blows my mind. It is immediately my thought, and I'm sure this is what you would feel as well, and probably are saying. Immediately, I'm thinking down the road, how is that helping our children at all? Because that's not what the real world is like. You
Mm-mm.
turn in a business project, a proposal, or a presentation, or a report that has the same number on it for literally everything, you don't have a job much longer. That's just, oh my gosh, that is so awful. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean
It's
to
all over
interrupt.
the
That
place.
just so,
No, it's all right. It's
it's
all
just,
over the place.
wow.
The idea is that if you give a kid a 0, it's just too deflating to their poor little feelings. And we need to protect their little feelings. And so even if they don't do anything, we should still give them a little, participation trophy. But kids are smart. They see, oh,
Yeah.
if I don't do anything and I get 50%, that means I can do 3 assignments and get a passing grade. And
Wow.
they figure that out and they game the system. And I mean, as a teacher, there's this one little boy, I won't say his name. He was hilarious. He was really friendly, really nice. Not always the greatest student. He finished an essay once, and spent all of his class time just not working. I told this kid, hey, you want me to read it? No, Mr. Buck, it's fine. It's great. Do you want me to leave some notes on it? No, Mr. Buck, it's fine. It's great. You have a week left to work on this. Do you want to work some more? No, Mr. Buck, it's fine. It's great. You want to come in for recess? No. Did you have a parent read it? They don't need to. Gives it to me. It's not very good. I give it back to him. He has an F. He's crestfallen. I mean, he's heartbroken. I felt bad, but I was like, this is going to be a good lesson for the kid. He's got to work through his feelings a little bit, but it's going to be good for him in the long run. Sure enough, next time we have an essay later on that semester, what is he doing? Hey, Mr. Buck, I wrote my intro. Can you read it and see if it's okay? This kid, who was
Good.
kind of the goofball in the class, came in for a lunch and a recess and said, can you leave some feedback? I'm confused about this spot. Can we talk through it? He had his parents read it. He had his friends read it. Like, he worked so hard on it because he learned that lesson when he was in 6th grade. It was a hard one for him to learn, but it was essential, that kind of tough love from a parent or a teacher or a mentor, whoever it was, to say, you do this kind of work and you're going to fail, but you can do better. Let's help you do better next time. And he did. You hold kids to a high standard, they meet it. So yeah,
Yep.
all that's to make the point that this no zeros grading is silly. There's equity grading, which is unlimited retakes. Homework isn't graded. No zeros is usually looped into that. If you turn it in late, you're not going to lose points on it, because all of these things are, you're grading the behavior, not the work, right? Even if they hand it in a month late, but if it's good content, it should still count.
So that's interesting, because in my opinion, I feel like obviously my opinion doesn't matter, but it seems like we should be grading a poor behavior, poor time management, and disrespecting your teacher. But of course, that's probably a very oppressive view.
Yeah. We want to, a lot of people like who advocate this kind of stuff, they want to push SEL in the classroom, where they're going to, play around with the kids' emotions to make them better people, but they then don't want to actually hold them to high standards that's truly going to build their character. Like, yes, you have to turn your essay in on time. Yes, you have to get feedback to do well. Yes, if you don't turn it in, you don't get points. That's just
Yeah.
called, meeting the basic expectations of any society or institution. And I could go on. There are all of these grading reforms, but usually they boil down to, we're lowering the standards to protect the feelings of kids in the moment, and then kind of failing them in the long run. It's this idea of toxic empathy, that's just always trying to protect somebody's emotions is what's best for them. But that's not the case. Sometimes we need hard truths. Sometimes, all the time, students need to be pushed, held to a high standard, and that means they're not going to meet it. They'll feel disappointed, but they're resilient. They'll be better for it in the long run.
That's exactly right. I love that. I think that is so, so important in every way. I support everything you just said. So we have these differences in proficiencies, right? For the actual proficiency, at least. You've talked a little bit about uncover or just the reality of it. But how can a parent who sees, I experienced this some as well, although I didn't realize what I was experiencing. So our kids tell us, but mom, I've got an A, I've got a B, I've got a C, whatever it is. How can the parents help find out what is that the true picture of their proficiency, I guess, like how they really are doing in school?
Standardized tests are the pinata that everyone loves to thwack. They're kind of the pariah that everyone loves to
Hmm.
hate, but they are the only honest measure of a student's academic ability. They're not perfect. Don't get me wrong. They're not perfect. They're one data
And
point
say,
among many.
poking the bear here. I don't think we've got
Yes,
a lot of big fans of standardized tests.
but if you want to know if your kid can read, if they can do math, there's so many ways that you can kind of juke a grade and mess around with it and give points for this thing or that thing. You can water down rubrics, but when a kid sits down and takes a standardized tests, can they read the passage and answer a few questions about it or not? If you give them the problem 3 times 11 equals, they can either identify that it equals 33 or they can't. Are standardized tests overdone? Yes, absolutely. We don't need to be testing the kids every third week of the school year for an hour at a time. Is it the only measure or the only thing that matters in a kid's life? No, of course not. But when push comes to shove, if you want to know if your kid can read or not, ask your teacher at the parent teacher conference to see the record of how they did it on a standardized test. And if the teacher doesn't want to give it to you, there's probably a reason for it. If the administration is being withholding, it's because they see the actual results that they're getting and they don't want to share that with parents. They don't want to share that with the public.
So that's really interesting. So I have to slightly wrap it up or wrap that part up and put a bow on it of so if you are an advocate in some way for standardized tests, what would you say would be a good cadence for it? I agree with you. I feel like my kids were taking standardized tests literally every 3 weeks is what it felt like. Even if that's not actual, it definitely felt like it. So how frequent should we be doing that?
If I had my way, there would be, there kind of is this, we have school choice. We're starting to
Hmm.
get testing choice too, where
Oh,
there are a lot of different private companies that have kind of nationally normed standardized tests. So there's MAPS test, there's FastBridge, there's a third one that I'm blanking on that I'm not even going to try and remember right now. But there are a handful of good reading tests out there that compare your student to all of the other students, millions of other students that take it. So it's not kind of this arbitrary, well, this is the third grade expectation. I mean, what does that even mean necessarily? But if you say, here's how they compare to every other third grader, the 30 million other third graders that take this test, that gives you a pretty good indication of how your kid is doing. So I would have one of these sort of private company choice tests in once in the fall, once in the spring. So you can see, have they grown over the school year? If they're not growing over the school year, let's ask some questions. And
yeah.
then one maybe every other year or every third year kind of um, states mandated test that allows comparison between districts, so we know who's failing, who's succeeding, what policies are working, what policies aren't. It's kind of a necessary evil to unearth where the failure is, where the success is, what do we need to replicate, what do we need to stop doing, where do we need to focus resources, where do we need to pull resources. The state test is kind of at the state level, not the federal level, is kind of a
Hmm.
necessary evil for all of that information gathering. So that would be
That
my ideal regime. Twice a year,
is,
just a quick little dipstick, you know, 15, 20 minutes for reading, 15, 20 minutes for math, all done, nothing else. And then a more invasive, far less frequent state test that kind of really gives you a snapshot of how kids in districts are doing.
I think that's actually, there's a lot of wisdom in that. The simple fact of the matter is you can't, we just had this conversation about English language arts programs, right? And book, well, the books, every child is going to have their own book that they get to study.
Hmm.
So this concept of having completely random different testing, there has to be some version of a baseline to get a good understanding. I agree with you. I actually love that idea of just like a 20-minute. That reminds me more of what we had in school. I feel like that was more of what we did. We had tests when I was growing up. You had some version of standardized tests, but I don't remember it being as oppressive as it is nowadays. And
Hmm.
hopefully we can get to a better place. That sounds like truly good grading reform. I like it. So I want to move on to the topic of engagement in particular. When, as a parent, I imagine, mm, well, let me restart that. As an administrator and a teacher, I imagine you have seen parents who aren't necessarily excited with everything that is happening in the school for whatever reason. And a lot of times, parents want to speak, but they are uncomfortable speaking, or they're afraid to bring up the issue, or maybe they're just angry about other things in general and they don't fully know how to express what they're saying. So it might come across poorly, or they just don't know what to say. So when a parent has a concern with the curriculum that they're seeing their kids learning, with grade inflation, if that is the topic they're feeling that their students aren't really learning, what is the best way to bring up these conversations, these topics when raising a concern? How should people go about doing that?
Well, I think about it from an administrative standpoint, because that's where I was most recently, was an assistant principal in a school. Um, I think about, okay, what parents were successful, which parents were effective. Um, and I'll say it was the parents who were firm, but not overly emotional, be it angry, sad, whichever it is. If a parent walked into my office or called me on the phone and started screaming at me, I shut down. I mean, if they start cussing, you can just be like, I'm sorry, this isn't going to be productive. Hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And so if you come at a teacher or an administrator already revved up to 110%, they're going to, I mean, just naturally get defensive. But you also don't want to let yourself get, treated like a doormat and just steamrolled. Don't necessarily take the first no for an answer. Push back, send another email, ask for an in-person meeting. And when you're there, be firm without letting your anger show. Press this. This is wrong. Here is why I think it is wrong. Here is what needs to happen instead. What are you going to do about this? And press the administrator. What are you going to do? What have you done? Why haven't you done that? Push, push, push. You can be firm without being confrontational. Don't be afraid of the confrontation. If it's for the good of your own child, walk into that office, ask for a meeting, and push. I don't want to say don't be confrontational. Don't be, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't be vitriolic. Don't be needlessly angry or caustic. That's a good word for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Start at the appropriate level. Not everything immediately needs to get run up the flagpole. You might ask a teacher for a change. You might push back on a teacher a little bit, and you'll get an email back and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I had no idea that happened. Yeah, sure, I'll get to it right away. If it's a small issue, keep it at a low level. Start with the teacher first. If you're not satisfied there, go up to the AP, then go to the principal. If a principal and a superintendent is good, what they'll actually do, if something comes to them too soon, they will push it back down to a lower an AP or a teacher and have that person respond instead. Not every problem needs to go all the way up the ladder right away. Check the policies of the district. If you can walk into an office, if you can walk into an administrator or a teacher meeting and you have a family handbook or a student handbook or whatever the board policies are to show what I think should be happening is actually in the policy, you're going to be on, I mean, the person you're confronting is going to have nothing to stand on. That was always, I don't want to say the most difficult ones for me, but that was always when I had, for me as an administrator, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And all of those policies right there. All right, we'll change that. I'm so sorry that happened. Not all administrators, we're not against parents. We're just trying to balance a lot of competing interests going on in one building. We're trying to maintain policies and procedures, which we know are sometimes going to upset people, but also sometimes can be wrong, and trying to not admit and apologize for everything, but also keep an ear to the ground for when we do things wrong. And, I was an assistant principal. I was a teacher. I apologized a number of times and said, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. Let's fix that. Let's see how we can make it better. You'll find a lot of teachers and administrators are pretty willing to work with you if you don't come at them caustically. I'm going to bring that word back in here. Yeah. And I mean, the final point I want to make is you can push all you want, but it really comes down to the school board. So in the district where I live, that I will not be sending my children, they have this just radical sex education curriculum. It's really inappropriate. The pictures they're showing kindergartners are just gross. The concepts that they're teaching kids are not only too early, but I think not, grounded in basic biology. As much as a parent wants to push against that curriculum, at the teacher level, at the administrator level, they have to follow the school board, the curriculum and the policies that the board sets. So unfortunately, if it is a school board policy or school board approved curriculum, that's where you have to go. And if you can't change it there, there's not a lot of that parents can do other than raise a stink and make somebody's life uncomfortable. But that might not change the curriculum. That's just going to make a teacher's life miserable. And then that curriculum is going to keep going. So, I mean, I realize a lot of parents don't have the choice of charters or private schooling or homeschooling, but that might be the only choice if it's coming from a school board and you're not going to be able to replace all 7 or 5 or 9 members or however many it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprised me too, and we didn't quite touch on it, but I don't know if you experienced this, because I don't think that we necessarily experience every situation. One of the things I've heard before is teachers getting trained on how to avoid, or that's not the right word, when a parent comes at them, how to deflect and how to be able to give an answer that is sneaky, if you will. Like it tries to like soothe the ruffled feathers without actually giving anything away. And then they just continue to do whatever they want, which I think is kind of like the first level of what you mentioned, as far as if a board has approved certain education and certain curriculum, then there are, frankly, you wouldn't leave your child in a toxic radioactive dump, right? We wouldn't live next to that. So it's important that we keep that in mind, that really truly, like, sending your kids to this school, it genuinely, it's going to have a huge impact on them no matter what. So what do parents do though if they don't have any other options? Because some parents feel really stuck with that. We hear that homeschool, you started to mention school choice a little bit before. I think most people think of public school, private school, or homeschool. What are some other options that might be available to them?
If we're talking about what parents can do, before we even get to the different schooling options, this might give some hope to parents.
Let's focus on that. Yeah, because I think that's important.
It really is all about parenting. There's a lot of sociological research out there that finds schools don't have a huge impact on sort of differences in achievement. So it all has to do with family background, the context in which the kid's being grown up. Are they read to before they go to sleep at night? Do they have family dinners and hear the adults talking, using more advanced vocabulary and kind of learning that way, it really all comes down to the family. If you send your kid
Wow.
to a bad school, be it academically mediocre or they're pushing a lot of ideas with which you disagree, you find uncomfortable, untoward, whatever it is, but you are spending time with your kid, you are reading to them, you are teaching them right from wrong, you are bringing them to church or some other formative institution, you are getting together with other families who share similar values, you are spending time with grandparents and extended family, you are discussing with them what they're learning in school and why it's wrong and why it doesn't go along with what your family believes. I mean, it's like a mouse trying to pull an elephant. The impact of the family is so much greater than the school that's really the message I want to end with. Not necessarily end with, because maybe we're going to keep going, but that's the message that I want to communicate here, is that like you just know how much influence you have over your child as a parent. And maybe there's no charter schools nearby, maybe you're not in a place financially to homeschool or private school, you can still talk with your kids, you can still spend time with them, you can still stay engaged as a parent, you can still teach them right from wrong, and they're going to ultimately follow you if you are parenting them and not this small influence that the school has.
That is so encouraging because nowadays I don't feel that is the message that is so often told. And or I feel like, and what I mean by that is I feel like the message is that parents and family are so bad, so you should stay away from them, from general society. And when you are going through, when we as parents go through this journey of discovery of the challenges that exist in the system, it can feel as if we are swimming upstream and don't have any hope. So, knowing the data does support the value of family, and that we as parents, we as a family do have such a greater impact on our children than we may initially realize or may even feel right in the moment. It's just so encouraging. So I really appreciate that. I do want to I want to go back for a minute because I know we're getting right up to the end, but there's one particular quote from your article that I thought was really interesting. And I just wanted to um, go back and see if you could maybe talk a little bit about it. So, going back to great inflation, that concept, you had said everyone wants six-pack abs until that means salad for lunch and a workout on your break. It's incumbent on policymakers in particular, those outside the day-to-day hustle, bustle, and stress of the school, to make the changes to push each actor in school towards academic excellence. This quote really resonated with me because my husband and I actually talk about this concept in general, that everyone wants the end result without putting the work in to get there. Um, we talk about that all the time, but I've always really focused on it on the concept of personal responsibility or personal accountability, taking ownership, having personal agency. But you go beyond that and talk about the administration and the policymakers. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I just love that idea.
Yeah, that idea came out. So was a teacher, was a, as I've mentioned a few times, an assistant principal. I'm currently a parent and am a policymaker. So I kind of see everyone's perspective. I'm not someone who's going to come in and say, all teachers are bad, or all parents are bad, or all parents are good. I realize I'm on a call of a parent organization, or on a panel or an interview with a all parent organization. But I see the teacher and administrator role because I was there. And that article came out because my last year working in schools, I just saw how everyone loves the idea of high expectations, but not what that means in practice. What do high expectations often mean in practice? Homework every night, maybe not every night. Homework can be a bit tedious and a waste of time sometimes, but you got to be doing some extra work at home. You got to be reading at home. It means late nights studying for a test. It means every once in a while your kid being told this essay is not up to par. you need to rewrite it. And that's going to be a lot of work. It means sometimes your kid's going to come home with a bad grade. Sometimes they're going to get in trouble and have to have a detention. Even the good kids are going to get in trouble. And I was a good kid. I got straight A's in high school, but I got in so much trouble in elementary school and middle school. Like even the quote good kids, if the school is really holding them to a high expectation, even the good kids are going to get dinged. So I saw parents weren't on board for high expectations in practice. Teachers, to run a teacher-led classroom where kids are engaged all the time is a lot more work. It's much easier to say, we're going to do group work today. And then you have 4 projects to grade, probably not a whole lot of writing. Everyone gets an A. And while the kids are working in class, the teacher's up front grading, planning, doing whatever the other work is. So when their prep time comes, they can shop on Amazon. And administrators, much easier, as I alluded to earlier, much easier to just sweep everything onto the rug. Kid gets sent to you for acting a fool in class. It would have been so much easier for me as an administrator to just have a talk with them and send them back versus having a tough conversation with the kid saying, you're coming back to me at lunch and you're going to miss lunch and recess today, calling the parent saying, hey, by the way, your kid's going to miss recess today. Parents probably not happy because they want their kid to go run and have fun. More paperwork from me, all of those things. Administrators don't want to hold high standards either. It's much easier to talk about high standards and then not actually implement them in practice. And that final push was saying it's really on the policymakers, school board members, state level congressmen and women, whoever is in charge of these schools to make good policy, to push everyone involved towards a rigorous education. For me as an administrator, if I have a strong student discipline code, that empowers me to maintain order in the school. If there is a strong retention policy, one of the more controversial things in school, holding the kid back a year, that allows, again, the teachers, the administrators, everyone in the building to maintain that high academic standard. If you're choosing good and rigorous curriculum that might move at a slightly brisker pace than teachers like, that's going to push the teachers towards a brisk pace in the classroom. They got to cover the stuff, teaching rigorous, academic focused content and none of this wishy-washy discovery learning, SEL, let's just sit around and talk about our feelings all day. It's incumbent on the policymakers to basically set the context for rigor in schools, because all of the natural human incentives towards ease, complacency, laziness that we all have push the other way.
I love it. I mean, we always say it takes a village, right? And that's sort of what it feels like. It's the village in education, but the good village, a village that we really genuinely can make a difference, but also combined with the student then putting in the hard effort. So I think that is such a good point and sometimes often missed. So, okay, thank you so much. I know we've run a little bit long, so I want to give you some time. Do you have to share any closing thoughts, anything that you want to just sign off on or say as a final thought if we didn't cover it? And then I do have a request. If you can offer us parents one mindset shift heading into the school year, what would that be?
I think I kind of touched on it already, is that it is all about parenting. We say parents are the primary educators, and it is this mantra that we kind of hold up on placards or put in a tweet. But what does that mean? Parents are the primary educators. It ultimately is up to parents to teach their kids right from wrong. It's up to parents to make sure that their kids are learning or not. System schooling is an act of delegation. You are saying, it's my responsibility to make sure this kid gets educated. I am choosing to trust this school, be it public, charter, private, homeschooling co-op, whatever it is, to educate my kid. And it's incumbent on the parent as the primary educator to determine if that person or system that they're trusting is doing its job. All about the parents. That comes with respect that you should have from the institutions, and also a lot of responsibilities to actually act on your role as the primary educator?
I want to highlight too that being a parent, being the primary educator does take hard work. It's
Hmm.
not just like the policymakers and everything. It is hard because we probably, if you haven't been super involved up to this point, then, or maybe you just kind of fell off the wagon. Maybe you got distracted and stuck doing some other just really fun things, right? And it can be work to get back into a good rhythm. So, well, that is fantastic. I love the positive reminder for our parents because I think that is so needed in today's world. There's too much negativity. So I really appreciate having that positive aspect moving forward. Tell everyone where they can find you and follow you on social media because you have amazing pieces you're putting out, and I want to make sure folks can read it.
Yeah. So again, I am at the American Enterprise Institute. So if you type in Daniel Buck AEI, you'll kind of find my landing page there, which will link you to recent articles that I wrote. Most of the time I write for National Review. So if you just look up Daniel Buck, National Review, you'll find a lot of my articles there. The Fordham Institute, I put a lot of pieces there too. And then I'm on Twitter mostly at mrdanielbuck.com or .com, Mr. Daniel Buck.
Mr. Daniel Buck, which I looked you up and I love it. What are you, the youngest old man in ed reform? Is that what it is?
Yeah, there was a Forbes columnist who called me that as an insult, and he called me the youngest old man in ed reform,
I
meaning
love it.
implying that I'm like a curmudgeon and I just don't like anything. And I was like, you know what? That's great, Brandon. Thank you, sir. I should probably cut you a check for that branding
Yeah.
piece of brilliance that you just gave me.
That is fantastic. Well, I love it. I thought it was fantastic. And I think it is, I have no problem with it. And I'm glad you don't either. So
Hmm.
thank you again for taking the time to
Yeah.
share all your insights with us. We really appreciate it. And
Thank you
I'm
for
sure we'll
having me
see you
on.
again.
Hmm.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.